Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we will be exploring the historic verdict of International Court of Justice in which it declared Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories as, of course, illegal, describing these, it as illegal and calling for immediate cessation. This landmark ruling has, of course, sparked international and global debate. In today's program, we will be exploring implications of this historic decision. Meanwhile, we know that at the same time and simultaneously, the situation on ground and the conflict and Israel's aggression and war on Palestine and Gaza is still ongoing, with the death toll, of course, rising above 38,000. What needs to be done after this historic decision we will be exploring in today's program, and could this decision be a game changer in legal terms for this conflict? We will be exploring all these dimensions. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Nadir Turk, who is Deputy Head of Mission State of Palestine. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Sheharyar, who is Senior Analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by international law expert Barrister Yasser Latif Hamdani. Welcome to the program. So, Barrister Yasser, let me start with you. When we look at this historic decision, can you tell us what are the implications of this decision, and can you tell us a little background for our audiences that when United Nations Security Council, of course, took this case to ICJ back in 2022? So what do you make of all this?
Well, so certainly, so see, it is historic, as you said, because what has happened here is that the ICJ has now very unequivocally ruled that the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories is completely illegal and in violation of international law. Now, that basically means that there are obligations that are placed on all member states and on Israel itself to now end that occupation. Now, this is significant because this is really the first time that the ICJ or an international body has gone and said this. So this is a historic day for the Palestinian people because since 1967 they've been occupied, and this is let's just go back into history. 1948, Israel comes into existence. Now that is through a partition plan that was that was implemented by the UN in 1948. Now in 1967, after the war, Palestine gets occupied, and this is that part of Palestine. Remember, our position is that the partition of Palestine, as it was undertaken in 1948, itself was unjust. However, now whatever territories were there, Palestinian territories, they were also occupied by Israel. Now, the thing with Israel is, and this is sort of their classic, and let me also say that what has happened additionally is that there are settler colonies within Palestine that Israel has made, and these are so those non-Israeli Jews or Jews
Right.
that have.
Right, that is an important issue, and we will be exploring that later in the program. But Barrister Yasser, when we talk about the legal precedent, from international legal perspective, what do you make of it? That, of course, ICJ has described and labeled this, of course, occupation of Israel as illegal. How significant is that in itself?
It is significant because now there are obligations on all member states to help end this occupation, right? This is now an obligation that has been placed under international law on all member states. And that's significant because that's the first time an international body has gone ahead and said something like this, especially the ICJ, which has jurisdiction. Now, when it addressed the jurisdiction question, there were several the issues that were raised by Israel and its supporters. And some of them said that the questions that were framed were biased, but the International Court of Justice overruled that and said that there was absolutely no occasion for the ICJ to decline its jurisdiction. So that itself is significant. I mean, if we think about it, and
Right.
they heard a number,
Right,
plethora of.
but Barrister Yasser, it still remains non-binding, and what are going to be legal repercussions for Israel? We will be talking later in the program, but now moving to the studios, Mr. Nadir, first of all, what do you make of this historic decision by ICJ? Of course, we know that more than 52%, including Pakistan, of course, participated in these, of course, proceedings, discussions that took place in February. And now, how do you look in, of course, on this historic ruling, and what is the sentiment within Palestine with the ongoing, of course, the conflict is still ongoing. We know that.
First, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to be a guest today. And as you mentioned, this is a historical decision by ICJ as one of the most important international organizations as legal status. To mention Israelis directly, clearly, that it is illegal occupation. And this decision came after a request sent to ICJ by the General Assembly of United Nations, by the majority of the members of the General Assembly, requesting to clear the situation of the Israelis present on the land of Palestine, according to international law, how we can deal with it and how we can mention it. According to that, this historical decision was taken by ICJ to mention many things. First, Israelis are a war of occupation of the Palestinian territories, first. Second, Israeli settlements are illegal. Shifting Israelis to Palestinian territories is illegal. Remove the Palestinians from their own territories is illegal. And remind us of the Security Council Resolution 2334 in 2016, which was taken and was very important and historical decision by Security Council, because this is one of less opportunities the Americans didn't use veto against a resolution in favor of the Palestinians. At that time, it was mentioned that the settlements are against the international law, illegal according to Geneva and according to international law. Other things was mentioned by the ICJ in decision. It is very important. The Israelis using double standards of procedures and laws in the Palestinian occupied territories by using Israelis law for the Israelis and other kind of laws and procedure against the which is kind of apartheid. And they speak about the this need to end this occupation immediately, which means that all the international community, all the members of United Nations need to have a procedure how to deal with this decision, how to end the occupation, how to end settlements, how to end the apartheid in the land of Palestine, and part of it, how to end the criminal genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, which is continuous since 7 October until now.
And genocide case is still ongoing at ICJ, which of course we know that South Africa brought that is another case, of course. But Sheharyar, coming back to this historic decision by International Court of Justice, which is highest and top court of UN, how do you think this is going to be changing the global discourse on Palestine-Israel conflict?
So, Maryam, like this ruling is very historic in nature, and it definitely holds a lot of weight when it comes to international law. And this also gives a lot of other international bodies a legal precedent on how to basically deal with the state of Israel and the illegal occupation and the annexation that they're currently undertaking. And this will also give a direction, I would say, a legal recourse or direction to international bodies such as the International Criminal Court. Various UN bodies are there, international human rights organizations are there, and they will get direction from this ruling on how to basically deal with this issue going forward. A lot of like countries, they are now under international legal cover, can take political actions against Israel. They can have political resolutions. They can have diplomatic ties that could be affected, bilateral ties between the state of Israel and other international stakeholders will be affected. So this will have a devastating effect on Israel's international diplomatic standing, which already is under a lot of question. But now a lot of like international bodies, as well as the neighboring countries and the Western allies of Israel will have to think twice on how to basically support this occupation.
But Barrister Yasser, coming back to the point that of course we know that this is going to be impacting Israel's global standing, but when we look at ICJ's decision and the precedents, can you tell us about 2004's ICJ's decision regarding the state of Israel, and also this decision we know that is non-binding. So what legal frameworks are available to Palestine and other third party countries that are supporting the cause to to ensure the implementation of this decision?
I think one of the things that Sheharyar just said is absolutely right. I mean, the ICC, remember, which is the International Criminal Court, is now mulling over issuing warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel, that is, is of course Netanyahu. So there is that. I think it opens up a new vista for the Palestine struggle. Now, while it is non-binding, but remember the language that is used in the decision itself talks about there having been created now obligations on all member states. Now, when we talk about international law, obviously ICJ's rulings are going to be non-binding in that sense. However, what it does and what it essentially, the reason why it is such a big victory is the fact that there are these obligations, and now the ICC, for example, the International Criminal Court, may be able to sort of proceed. Uh, Remember, there's a lot of pressure right now on the ICC from its western from the Western countries, especially the United States of America. The United States senators have in the past threatened the ICC prosecutor, Mr. Karim Khan, because he wanted to proceed against Netanyahu. So all of that sort of now comes under, like Sheharyar said, under a question mark. I mean, those activities by the Western states, or in especially the United States, where there are, like I said, there are senators who've been threatening Karim Khan. All of that goes out of the window. Now, I believe that what this would do is change the very nature, the landscape, because now
Right, but
there are
Barrister
states
Yasser, at the
in.
same time, we know that, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is of course, fly to United States in, a couple of days, and he's going to address Congress as well. So, of course, some of the Western countries are, of course, changing their perspective, but when we talk about this important decision and the significance of it, let's talk about the implementation, or it's just the moral standing of these countries that are going to be impacted.
I think it is more than moral standing. There is, of course, that thing. I mean, you've now declared this occupation illegal. The occupation, remember, is the longest standing occupation in history, where these territories have been occupied for the last 50 odd years, 57 years, I believe. So, 57 years of persecution. Now, remember, this the other part of this judgment is, or this advisory opinion is that there are activities undertaken by the Israeli occupation forces and Israel itself against Palestinians as a people. Now, this opens up the sort of the narrative, international narrative, that is now rightly being created, that there is an ongoing genocide. It's not just genocide, a physical genocide, it is a cultural genocide. And all of that gets
Right.
a lot, a boost from this judgment. As far as its implementation is concerned, obviously, when we talk about international law, ultimately it is the states who have to make this decision as to how they're going to proceed, because international law as a whole is, that is the way of the world. Unfortunately, it is non-binding. Uh, but like I said, that does not sort of take away from the significance of this judgment, because what you've got is this new paradigm shift that has happened because of it.
Right, right. We're talking about the paradigm shift, but looking back at the situation on ground in Gaza and, of course, the surrounding territories, the decision also talks about, of course, Israel's illegal occupation of the natural resources of Palestine. What do you make of it, and what kind of resources are available to Palestine at this point in time to pursue this case further?
Just I like to explain one thing. This decision, it is historical, but on the other hand, it is non-binding decision.
Yes, indeed.
So it is only going to be used by the United Nations as giving a power, legal power for the status and how to dealing with the Israelis without getting punishment or getting problem that Israelis going to use any actions against the other countries, that it is anti-Semitism action, because they are following the legal and the international law. This is very important. The timing for this resolution is very important, because a few days before this decision, the Israeli parliament take a resolution that it is not going to be two states on the historical land of Palestine. It is going to be only Israel's state, only for the Jew. So this is very important, the timing. And the other important thing of the timing, that is we are a few months away from the Americans' elections.
November
So
5th.
in case Mr. Trump win the elections and become the president of the United States of America again, and he going come again with the same scenario, which is dealing with the Senate, which is giving the Israelis 88% of the historical land of Palestine, and gives the Palestinians only 12% of the Palestinian territories, and he tried to make the Israeli settlements in the occupied territories of Palestine legally, okay, then he will face this decision that it is a ground, and he need to deal with it. This is very important. About natural resources, we speak about, water. Okay, Israelis actually stealing, looting the Palestinian water, looting the Palestinian gas in Gaza. We have some oil in West Bank, they stole it. The stones, and everything is natural resources in over the ground or under the ground. Even the historical places of Palestine, they use it as historical places for the Jew, not according to the Muslim. And they try to change the facts on the ground by having a plan to damage the Aqsa Masjid and build a Jewish temple over it. And they try right now to looting even the land of the churches, for Christian churches, and try to putting even taxes over the churches itself. To later on they can't pay the tax, then they will looting the Christians places in Palestine. So they are trying to control everything in Palestine, to try to looting everything in Palestine. So what we are waiting for, this is going to give the power again and again for the international society with all the countries around the world to deal with the Israelis exactly in the same way how they deal with the apartheid system in South Africa before. That they are not having the right to be supplied by weapons. They are not going to get economical and commercial relationship with this country, as long as it is occupies the Palestinian territories. They will stop dealing with the products of the settlements in the occupied territories of Palestine, and they start going to recognize Palestine as a state, and the people of Palestine have the right of, to decide their future by self-determination, and they have the right to have their own state in their own homeland with Israel at its capital. On the other hand, we appreciate, highly appreciate the Pakistani government, Pakistani political groups, that all of them was in the same page when they mentioned Netanyahu as a terrorist. And this was very important, and this is going to be a step other countries need to build over it to send the Israelis leaders, the Israelis army leaders, to ICG and ICC to deal with them as a criminal of war and send them the punish what they deserve actually.
Right, of course, this is very important, the decision by Pakistani government, not only to, of course, describe or label Netanyahu as a terrorist, but also there is a committee that is going to be banning Israeli products. Of course, this is an important decision, but looking back at the conflict on ground, Sheharyar, what do you make of the spillover effect of this conflict? Because we know that now in Yemen and even in Lebanon for quite some time, and now it has intensified. The conflict is only escalating with each passing day, although such decisions are coming from international bodies, and the protests are ongoing on global level and also within Israel. But simultaneously, the situation in ground is that conflict is escalating each day. What do you make of all this situation?
So, Maryam, like as Israel faces international diplomatic isolation, and it's like being increasingly criticized by its strongest supporters historically. So now
even within Israeli cabinet now there are voices.
Israeli cabinet, you can like also include the Israeli population. Now that Netanyahu is trying to go to the US to talk to the Congress, it should also be noted that he is doing a direct flight to the US. Initially he was thinking of going to European capitals, but like he chose not to because he was afraid that there are international arrest warrants against him. So these like countries historically have been very pro-Palestine, and now if Israel doesn't even trust them, because they internationally all of these countries have now taken a stance, and they have taken a stance of upholding international law. And all of these countries, the European countries especially, historically have been strong supporters of the state of Israel, and now they are kind of distancing themselves. And we have like seen politically as well, a lot of like countries, their whole electoral or election processes have been affected.
The repercussions of
their standing on how they have like supported Israel and committing this genocide. And a lot of like uprising, or like I would say grassroots movements have like sprung across the Western capitals. I'm not even including Muslim countries. I'm talking about historically countries that have been aligned with the state of Israel. Other than that, now I personally believe that Israel is trying to increase or bring more countries into this whole conflict so that they can ask for more assistance from the US. Now we have to like see that.
But this ICJ decision also alludes to the countries that are providing aid to Israel.
So one exact comment from the ruling that I want to basically add here is that it clearly says that other nations are obligated not to render aid or assistance in maintaining this illegal occupation that Israel is conducting. Now this is a big question mark on a lot of like Western countries that are providing aid, that are providing ammunition, that are providing military aid to Israel to basically keep this occupation in place. The international court has clearly told them not to do that. They are obligated not to do that. So this is a big turning point, I would say, and now from this point onwards, countries that are still supporting Israel when it comes to providing aid, when it comes to providing assistance, they will have to reallocate their aid, and they would have to focus more on the refugee situation and the humanitarian situation that is so devastating that it hasn't been like observed since the Second World War. A lot of like international humanitarian organizations have basically also given the status of like the refugee situation that has like developed over there, the humanitarian catastrophe that's going on over there. Now international companies or aid organizations, they're obligated to redirect or reallocate their aids towards supporting the humanitarian cause.
Right. We will be talking about that as well. But Barrister Yasser, when we talk about this ICJ's decision, what are the obligations or what steps can United Nations Security Council can take to ensure the implementation of this advisory opinion of ICJ?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go back to the ruling. I think the court considers that the violations by Israel of the prohibition of acquisition of territory. Look, see, the thing is significant. It actually says that the acquisition of territory by Israel, there is, and so what it says is that Israel actually has tried to acquire the territory and tried to make it its own through use of force, and by thereby denying the Palestinians their right to self-determination. Now that itself is a significant statement because that violates the very principle on which the League of Nations was formed in 1919, and then obviously the United Nations itself. Now United Nations itself now is under obligation to do something about the issue, to end this occupation now. I think the mechanism is, of course, through the United Nations. There's, one can expect a resolution from them. Now, that's, something that is neither here nor there because Israel has a history of, basically ignoring these international resolutions or the UN resolutions. But, like the other participants have said, what the obligations that have been created on these member states, and this is something that needs to be reiterated. These obligations mean that the defense or sort of the defense ties between the United States and Israel, but also the aid, the military aid that the United States intends to provide Israel, that itself comes under question mark. So, the international law, obviously, when we talk about it, it has to operate in these or through these mechanisms. But those mechanisms now have gotten a boost. Now, about even more significant is the ICC, because ICC, and the reason why I would imagine Netanyahu doesn't travel from other capitals is because the ICC member states would now be under obligations because of the warrants, and now they have this additional ruling that kind of adds to it. So in that sense, like I said, see, remember what the court has done is that it has found Israel's policies and practices in complete breach of international law. These policies and practices are an unlawful act of continuing character entailing Israel's international responsibility. So basically, it says that what Israel is doing is in complete violation of the United Nations Charter, and it completely violates the very basic principle of law of nations, which is that or where groups are concerned, it violates the very basic principle, which is the right of self-determination, and that right of self-determination now has been reinforced by this judgment.
Of course, the right to self-determination has been reinforced. But Mr. Nadir, when we look at the situation on ground, of course, the recent WHO warnings tell us that there is, of course, threat of polio spread in the Gaza Strip and the surrounding areas. Can you tell us how serious are these threats and what needs to be done by the international aid organization at this point in time to, of course, provide aid, because we know that a lot of trucks, a number of hundreds of trucks are still, of course, stuck for months now at the Rafah crossing and other areas.
And first of all, I like to explain one thing, that even the Egyptian government taking a decision to stop receiving humanitarian aid to Gaza because there is many trucks are stuck on the borders and they don't have the opportunity to send it to Gaza. On the other hand, Gaza people are starving to death without clear water, without electricity, without gas since 7 of October until now. So the Israelis right now, they are making, collective punishment against the Palestinians because again and again their plans still as it is that transfer displaced Palestinians out of Gaza as a first step to occupy Gaza and build settlements there. This is the plan, Israel's plan. But after the SCG decision right now, I think the game going to be changed. The reaction of the international community going to be changed. We are waiting right now to see what is going to be the reaction of the European countries, because some of them are a great supporter for the Israelis, a great supporter for the occupation by technical, economical, and military aid to Israelis. This has continued since 1948 until now. We are waiting to see their reactions, and we are waiting to see after the important step was taken by the Pakistani government by mentioning Netanyahu as a terrorist person, and this is going to have legal steps in the ICC need to be against him to be a war criminal. We want to see the other countries' steps, the Muslim countries and Arab countries and other partners in the international community, what steps they're going to take after this Pakistani step, which is we appreciate it too much, and going to lead, I think this step going to lead all the international community to make the Israelis under pressure to follow the international law and stop dealing with them that it is country above the international law, above the international resolutions. This status need to be end once forever. Israelis need to follow the rules of the law, and we will going to see, I think, I'm very, very optimistic that the Israelis very soon, they're going to be in serious retaliation against them, not only by Muslim Ummah, not only by, the southern countries who are supporting Palestinians, but I think even their historical supporters going to be in the corner to deal with them exact that I mentioned before, how they are dealing with the apartheid regime in South Africa.
But there is kind of sentiment when we look at Netanyahu's, of course, recent address to his parliament that Israel can survive without the world. So they don't fear the isolation. That is one of the reasons that they show no concern to ICC or ICJ's decisions. Or any other international bodies, Amnesty International's decisions or human rights obligations.
The Israelis' reaction, actually, as usual, it is going to be more aggressive against the Palestinians. And they're going because, the Israelis in the deep of their hearts, the Zionists, they believe that Allah create all the world, okay, all the people to be their slaves, okay, only to serve them. So according to that, this psycho thinking that they think that they can live without the world, this is any psycho can think in this way, but no one can live without the world. Even a human being alone, he can't live without people around him, without social relationship. But he thinks that if he think war can bring peace for them, breaking the rules, international law, and ignoring the ACG and United Nations resolution and all this, orders, and he can survive and live in peace, I think he needs to think it twice and also
he needs to rethink, and maybe that is
and
the reason.
If he thinks the American support will make him survive, Americans, I think, since Vietnam until now, they didn't win a war. Even when they are going to Yemen to stop what is happening there in the Red Sea, they give up and leave the area because they are not succeed to stop what is happening there. So Americans are losing, Israelis are losing, so we are waiting for strong pressure to make Israelis follow and obey the international law.
Right, and Sheharyar, of course, rightly so, no country can survive in isolation, and maybe that is the reason a lot of voices are now against Netanyahu's decisions. But coming back to his policies of expanding this war just for his personal vendetta or agenda of expanding his political career, what could or what needs to be done by countries, neighboring countries or countries within the Middle East to avoid the expansion of this conflict within the neighboring countries, which we know that has escalated in the last couple of days, and it has been, of course, piling up for months now. But these recent incidents in Lebanon and in other countries, what needs to be done by other countries in the Middle East?
So, Maryam, there's a two-step answer to this question. One is the direct neighbors, and then there's the international community led by the US and the Western allies. So when it comes to expansion of this conflict, that is in nobody's control. The way this conflict is now igniting and like taking other countries like Yemen, like there's also Lebanon, and there's like a lot of like discussion on the Iranian involvement as well. So this whole escalation of conflict goes in the favor of Israel, and I think they're instigating it, and to expand the theater of war, in which they have like this hope that if this conflict goes out of hand, or if more countries are engulfed in this conflict, then eventually their Western allies would have to like step in and come in for their support. This is what they're relying on right now. Right now, after this historic ruling, the onus, or I would say the moral obligation, is now on the international community, especially the Western allies, historical allies of Israel, to basically put more political pressure on Israel to basically go for a ceasefire and get on the negotiating table. One thing is like clear.
Right,
even
but
if
we know that these negotiations have been happening for some time now. Do you think this recent ruling is going to be speeding up that process or slowing it down?
There will definitely be more international pressure. There would be more calls of international sanctions, trade sanctions, economic sanctions, and we already know that the divestment campaigns, the BDS campaign, that pressure is coming from the grassroots of these countries. Now the youth of these countries, the students,
right,
the university students, they are basically calling for their governments and pressurizing them on divesting from companies or organizations or anyone who has a profit motive from this illegal occupation. Again, the same was the case with Pakistan, when they basically formed a committee in which they would also be analyzing, and like they would be banning companies or organizations that are profiting or having some trade linkages or profit sharing linkages with the state of Israel. And this will continue, and this will basically expand to other countries as well. So the international isolation, economic isolation, and I agree with Mr. Nadir that Israel alone cannot just depend on the US and be isolated from the rest of the world.
Right. So lastly, Barrister Yasser, very briefly, what is the way forward after this ICJ's ruling? And also we know that there have been talks going on between the two parties and other stakeholders. What do you see the way forward for this conflict?
I think as far as obviously the first things first, we have to end there has to be a ceasefire, and the war, it has to end, the war that has been going on for the last almost 9-10 months. I think that needs to end first, and then obviously one would go ahead and look at how this ruling can be implemented. The point is that this recognition of legal consequences that have arisen from the discriminatory legislation and measures. That's the language that the ruling or the advisory opinion uses, right? It talks about the fact. So let's get back to sort of the basics of it. What the Israeli game plan has been, and this is the same game plan that India has implemented in Kashmir as well, which is to change the demographic nature of these territories, right? And that's it. That's something it's doing by putting settlers in. Israel is doing by putting settlers in Palestinian territories. I think the first thing would be to get those settlements, a halt to those settlements, and perhaps get some of those settlers back into Israel. I think that would be the first step in sort of going forward. But yeah, I mean that's essentially what the ruling says, and what it basically look. It talks about systemic discrimination based on race, religion, or ethnic origin. It says it's in violation of Article 2 of the and it implies that there is a cultural genocide that
Right.
is taking
Right.
place of Palestinians. So
Right.
all of that needs to be now taken into account, and perhaps states like our own country, Pakistan, but other Muslim states and other Arab states, they can perhaps push forward with something that would be concrete on ground.
Right, right. Thank you very much, Barrister Yasser Latif Hamdani, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Nadir Al Turk, for joining us in today's
Thank you very
program. If
much.
you want to briefly comment
Please,
lastly.
I just like to, as a closing point, what is needed actually, as my brother said, that first of all, ceasefire in Gaza and in this criminal war. Second, take serious steps to end the Israeli occupation to Palestinian territories and facilitate the establishing of Palestinian independent state on Palestinian land with Jerusalem as its capital, and facilitate the right of return for Palestinian refugees. Second, we need to, or third, we need the international community to do financial steps. First, we need them to reserve Israelis and the support of Israelis with weapons which used to be destroyed Gaza, to reserve at least $100 billion to rebuild Gaza, because our people will not waiting for international aid to rebuild Gaza and give them normal, peaceful life again before
Right.
the
So we
7th of
need to
October.
start talking
So
about.
we start serious points. How they are trying to do
Right.
against the Russians, they need to do against the Israelis and the support of Israelis. Second things, we need them to make serious study to recognize and find the facts on the ground, how much the benefit of the Israelis by using the Palestinians' land, Palestinians' natural resources since the 1948 until now, and giving back this money
Right.
for the Palestinians, because
To
this
repay
right of the
them for all the
Palestinians,
time, of
not right for the power of occupation. So these steps need to be ended, and we are optimistic, and we are trust international law, trust international organization, trust our brother in Pakistan and other friends and brothers around the world. They're going to take serious steps to do that against the Israelis, to give the right for the real owner of the land,
Right.
not to keep it as it is right now between the power of occupation.
Right.
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadir Al Turk. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, we talked about the implications of ICJ's historic decision on, of course, illegal occupation of Israel of Palestinian territories, and now this is obligation on international community, and this is legal as well as moral duty of international community to ensure the cessation of hostilities in Gaza, and to start thinking about and talking about rebuilding of Palestine and independent state of Palestine. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.